Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited about this Team Connect 7 release. We have a lot of fun things to show you. Okay, let's quickly cover the agenda. I'll do a quick welcome and overview of what we're covering today. Also talk a little bit about the idea portal for Team Connect. Manu and Brad are going to jump in and talk about InvoiceIQ and some enhancements that we have around invoice review and approval workflows. I will cover for Cal for the CSM activities, and then I also have a couple of technical updates. And again, we'll save some time at the end for questions and answers. Okay, the first thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, if you're not familiar with our e-training, this is definitely something you may want to check into. It's a collection of very easy to understand videos that walk you through particular parts of the application. We've added a couple of new modules recently. We've got the InvoiceIQ that's going to be coming soon, and some of the updates with CSM 7 that we're going to show you today. There's a lot of other really great stuff out there covering financial management, reports, TAP Team Connect integration, a lot of other content. So if you're not familiar with that, please reach out to your account manager, or you can email training@mitratech.com. All right, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the Idea Portal. And again, I hope everyone is familiar with the Team Connect Idea Portal by now. If you're not, I'll give you a quick introduction in just a moment. But I wanted to call out some statistics that we've recently gathered. So these are specific to version 7. We did include 11 ideas that were submitted by customers or sometimes by our staff on behalf of customers. And those items include the overall enhancements around improving timekeepers and rates, being able to approve those in one step, the ability to the ability to report on and review timekeepers around diversity information, several invoice review enhancements that it comes on the tail of a lot of the invoice review improvements that we've been making over the last couple of years. And also, one of the enhancements Brad's going to talk about, the ability to select a method for handling timed out invoices in that approval workflow. We also have another 16 that we've released in the last 12 months. I talked about a little bit about some of those at the Interact conference. We have a nice healthy backlog of 158 items that are in the for future review. And we really want you all to sign up for the portal, go in, look at those ideas, vote for them, comment on them, and really help us understand what things we should be looking at next. And we also have another 15 that are in the backlog for consideration and discovery in projects that are coming up in the next couple of quarters. So we're very happy with the amount of responsiveness we're starting to get out of tackling some of that stuff out of the Idea Portal, and we look forward to doing a lot more in the future. Just a very quick overview of the Idea Portal itself. This is where you can interact directly with product management, give us feedback on what you think would be helpful in your day-to-day work. It is located at teamconnect.ideas.aha.io, but you can also easily get to it from your Team Connect community page. We respond to anything that's submitted there within 2 weeks. The response might be, we like this idea, but it would be for a future release. But we will, communicate with you through that portal. And there is a voting process that we've implemented. You have 5 votes to apply however you like. We heavily rely on the voting to determine priority for features. It's not the only factor. We do have to look at scope and applicability, but we really want you to get in there and vote for ideas and comment on them and give us your perspective, because that really helps us when we're doing that prioritization process. So this is just a little bit about what that page looks like. When you are in the portal, you'll see filters on the left-hand side. The most relevant one would be looking at the flag for future review ideas and seeing what's in there. And you can see there how many people have voted for it. You simply click on the voted box or the vote box to vote for it. You can unclick that box to unvote something if you find something you like better. And finally, you can click on any one of those ideas that somebody else has submitted and add your own comments. That, again, really helps us with context. So if you see something that somebody has submitted and maybe you have some more information to add, please go ahead and feel free to comment on that idea as well. And then finally, we always like to plug our client working groups. Hopefully, many of you who are on the call today have had experiences working with client working groups. And that's going to be part of Lee's role today, is talk a little bit about his experience. If you're not familiar, we do heavily rely on client working groups as we go through our design and development processes. So if you're interested in something like this, you can reach out to elmproducts@meetyourtech.com, or just reach out to one of us directly, and we can kind of let you know what client working groups are going on. And it's a commitment to participate in the groups and potentially provide some homework type information that I've outlined there below. Usually it's a one meeting about every 2 to 3 weeks, and for a period of 2 or 3 quarters. Kind of depends on the size of the project. You don't have to be present at every meeting, but we're really looking for people who can commit to trying to be there and really who are going to provide that feedback and interact with us. So if that's something you're interested, please reach out to us.
Cool, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so InvoiceIQ, right? So InvoiceIQ is, as the name suggests, it's all around, reviewing invoices. So when we're looking at the market needs or why we want to develop a tool, use AI capabilities to help review invoices, we found that the main problem with invoice review is that it's a very time-consuming process. As these invoices can be messy, with a lot of line items, and the invoice reviewers don't always have the time to spend on them to review them properly. Sometimes it's not even a priority for them. And additionally, the law firms don't follow the outside counsel guidelines really well, which can then result in anomalies and exceptions. And then, they bill for things they shouldn't. And subsequently, the legal department is not really spending a lot of time reviewing invoices, and there's potential to spend more, on items that shouldn't have been billed, in the first place. So when we kind of identified the market needs, our goal was basically to improve the accuracy and efficiency in the invoice review process, right? Instead of using kind of the machine learning technology. So the invoice reviewer does not have to review, the hundreds of the line items. They have some clues, some insights, some recommendations to basically make their life around invoice review better. And secondly, we also kind of found out that, since the invoices might not be being reviewed, correctly, if you can provide some nice, recommendations and adjustment opportunities, there's definitely potential to reduce legal spend as well. So those are the kind of the 2 goals I'll request you to keep in mind as we're going through a demonstration. I'll talk you how the technology we've built will help kind of solve, solve these goals. So in order to even for us to get started, right, the first thing we have to do is basically put together our machine learning technology in place, like the InvoiceIQ module. So just like other modules in Team Connect, like CSM, like Legal Hold, like SOP, the InvoiceIQ also is a module that you'll install in your Team Connect environment. And what that basically does is when the invoices come in from Collaborati, the InvoiceIQ module kind of makes a call to our machine learning engine, where it basically gets categorizations for the description of the line items. It can be set up pretty quickly. It's not really dependent on your current Team Connect environment. It's basically just setting up the InvoiceIQ module, making a couple of connections, and you could be good to go, pretty fast. We also have a training database, right? Because the concept of machine learning is the learning. It needs to kind of learn over time. So what we'll do is we also have a training database where some of the anonymized invoice items are aggregated together, so we can then improve, get some feedback, from the different Team Connect environments and provide, better categorizations of data. So that's kind of at a very high level how the process flow works. The key here is it's not really not very kind of heavy to implement. It's pretty lightweight, can be easily be set up in limited time just by installing the IIQ module. I wanted to kind of introduce you the meter codes and meter categories. So this is kind of our base for a machine learning technology. So what we've done is these are proprietary codes, that basically read the description of the line item of an invoice and then automatically assigns these categories to it. These categories are like the UTBMS codes, but a little more granular as well. Like you'll see, like the plan and prepare, I think UTBMS code is just one code. The meter code is actually 4 of them, because we can actually break down, depending on what the text is, what that plan and prepare text, the text is really related to. Is it related to depositions? Is it related to court or trial or something? Is it related to mediation? So the key here is, we will automatically categorize each and every line item that comes into Team Connect, from your vendors into one of these meter codes and meter categories. And these meter codes and meter categories totally depend on the description of the line item. Basically, what we do is we apply, natural language processing. We read the invoice line item, and depending entirely on the text of the line item, we will bucket that line item into these categories. And these are like some 94 out-of-the-box meter codes and meter categories that are, that are part of the IIQ module. These codes don't really rely on what the UTBMS code that's been submitted, stuff like that. The key here is we only rely on totally the description of the line item. So what it looks like is when an invoice comes in, depending on what the text or the description of the line item is, it'll categorize that line item with one of these meter categories, one of the 94 meter codes and meter categories we have. Now, sometimes, the machine learning model, if it's a vague entry, it'll just say it as uncategorized, because it really could not find an activity that is tied to that particular line item. But the key here is we use NLP to decipher what the particular activity code is that we feel using machine learning. One of the keys, when we kind of had this discussion with the clients, a lot of the clients, they use these existing CSM rules where they say, hey, we don't pay for research. So they might put a keyword to block, the word research. It might be an existing CSM rule. But what if the vendor doesn't use the word research, but they use a synonym for the word research? Well, then your existing CSM rule, might not work. But with this, since we are not really relying on anything else but the description of the line item, this is where it can actually provide value in what you currently might have, with your CSM rules. So the line items get categorized with the meter codes and meter category. And then based on another out-of-the-box rules engine, you can configure what you want the system to do depending on those categorizations that have happened on the line items. So we have a categorization, for example, block billing. You see, anytime the IIQ machine learning algorithm detects a particular line item as block billing, I want to reject it altogether, because we don't really pay for block billing. Or if you say something like travel, like if you want to review travel, you might not want to always pay for travel, but some travel you might want to pay for, some not. So you can actually just add a recommendation. Anytime it looks for the categorization travel, you can add the rule for it to just recommend and a recommendation for the invoice reviewer. So you can basically decipher or create any of your rules on all the 94 meter codes that are there. And you can create as many of these as you want directly from the UI and the application. It's not something that you'll require services effort or someone to go and set up and do this. This can be all done directly from the UI, as I'll show you. So that can and that basically then will dictate what action you want to take based on the categorization, of the meter code. So I'll kind of show that during the demonstration as well. Also part of the meter codes and meter categorization and stuff like that. One of the key things we heard from our clients was, hey, you know what? You have a lot of CSM rules that are attorneys, kind of invoice reviewers don't really pay a lot of attention to. So what makes you think that they will suddenly start, paying more attention to your, machine learning recommendations, right? They might just ignore them and want to review invoices. So with the ability of these dashboards that we provide out of the box with IIQ is you can actually also get a sense of how your firms are doing, how many violations they've had, both based on your CSM rules and the InvoiceIQ rules, and also your own performance of your invoice reviewers, right? Like if invoice reviewers have got recommendations from the IIQ module, or have got recommendations for the CSM rules, have they really taken any action on it? Have they really made any adjustments? So all that information would be available for the legal department users, maybe the GCs or the AGCs, to review what's basically going on, one, with your firms, and also with your invoice reviewers, like how are they performing against all these recommendations? We provided, line items with 5,000 worth of, invoice value, having these recommendations. Were any adjustments really made to all those line items with recommendations, or they were just paid? So all this kind of information would be available with these dashboards. We call them the GC and the AGC dashboards, set up like 12 different dashboards. And also at the same time, we have what we call a compliance dashboard that I know Brad really likes. Is basically it compiles all the meter codes and meter categories and give you an idea of what you're really being billed for, what activities are your different firms really billing you for. And then you can even kind of, as part of version 2, what we're working on, you'll be able to do kind of drill down into all these activities, look at invoice details, and see what's basically going on, with the different firms. So all this is pretty, I think, pretty cool stuff. It's all part of IIQ. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of give you kind of quick demonstration of how this basically works, and then we'll take it from there. So as I said earlier, this is the IIQ module that I've installed. It's like a similar module, like you might see, with Legal Hold or CSM. I have my IIQ module set up over here. You make a couple of connections, one to based on the diagram I'd seen, one to the training database, one to the machine learning, the model itself. And here is where the meter codes rules reside, right? Depending on whatever meter codes and meter categories there are, and you can select from a list of, I think, 94 of them. You can basically choose what you want to do with them. And then, like in this case, I've said, like, anytime I see travel, I want to recommend it. Anytime I see block billing, which is basically multiple tasks in a single line item, I'm going to reject it altogether. Research, we don't really pay for. Sometimes we do. I definitely want to just have a recommendations. Meals, I want to adjust it automatically. We don't really pay for meals, right? So you can basically create any of these rules you want of any of these categories. I've just created, I think, 6, and you can then choose what you want to do with. Either you want to recommend it, you want to adjust it by a particular percentage, or you want to just reject it outright. And all that can be done depending directly, from the UI. So once you basically set this up, when the invoice comes in, it basically and goes into workflow. And I created this one earlier. It basically reads the description of the line item and automatically assigns what it thinks the meter categorization and meter code and meter categorization for that particular line item is solely dependent on the text or the description of the line item. It's not really, in this case, you'll see the category I have submitted is outside counsel fees. But just by looking at the text, in this case, I think it's pretty straightforward. Block billing, you'll see it's got multiple tasks in a single line item. It basically categorized this as block billing. And one of the rules I had set up was anytime I see block billing, I'm going to automatically reject it. The insight here will say will automatically be populated only if you have those rules for it. So the rule here is basically the line item has been potentially categorized as block billing. Recommendation line item has been automatically adjusted. So the InvoiceIQ insights and recommendations play in conjunction with your existing CSM warnings or rules you already might have. In this case, I already have a warning that's saying something about the negotiated rate for this particular timekeeper. I just want to show you that this doesn't really replace your existing CSM rules. This will work in conjunction with your existing CSM rules. And similarly, if I just go down the list, you'll see, snack before trial. It basically automatically categorized as a meal. And the reason here is it did not really look for if you have keywords for lunch or dinner, that you're using to look for meals. It basically just kind of looked at used NLP and looked at the description of the line item in its entirety, and then said, yeah, this is probably meal, and feels pretty good about that it's meal. It's about like a 99% positive. It feels this is a meal. And then if you had like a MitraTech rule, for the meals, it can say like, hey, I want to, it's been potentially categorized as meals. It should be automatically adjusted by 50%. So you're basically giving clues to your invoice reviewers based on whatever rules you've set up around those particular Mitra codes. The key here is these don't really rely on just the actual codes or UTBMS code. It just basically looks at the description. I know I heard from one of the clients that they said like, hey, you know what, we paid for a suitcase that the one vendor had basically billed us for, and we totally missed it. So then I'm like, oh, let me try that. So I basically just try for like suitcase for trainer. I also did that keyword. It basically did categorize it as travel. In some cases, you might not even have rules for them, right? You might not have a rules for review and analyze. If you don't have a rules for it, you won't really see it as a particular recommendation on an insight, but the line item still would be categorized with that particular Mitra code, even though you did not have a rule. So now if you look at our initial goal we had, right? Help review the invoice review process. So let's say you have an invoice with hundreds of line items. So you can now easily, if all the adjustments that have happened, if you know, hey, I already just block billing, you can easily come over here and just filter out all the block billing line items. You can also filter out all the meals line items to make sure like, yeah, this is definitely, we want to adjust this, right? So based on whatever rules or your invoice reviewers they have, if you have hundreds of line items, these are always automatically categorized, and you can just filter out the ones you're looking for as well. If I go, then I'm going to find another invoice that has a few more line items. You'll see that the rules and the Mitra codes categorizations automatically get applied, and then the invoice reviewer can easily kind of filter on them as well. This is a much larger invoice in terms of line items, so you'll see I have a lot more Mitra codes and Mitra categories that automatically got assigned to the line items, and I can easily kind of filter out the ones if I want to see, hey, someone paid for meals again, what it is. Someone paid for postage, or we don't really pay for postage hypothetically, or yes, postage charges. So you can basically easily be able to filter out and help kind of review, like, hopefully save time reviewing invoices if there is a large invoice, line item data set for all invoices. That is one of our goals we had to kind of help review the invoice process. And the second thing was basically, potential for adjustments now, right? Because you might be, if you weren't really reviewing invoices really well, something might have slipped through the cracks. You don't really pay for travel, but you did not have this categorization. You might have paid for travel, right? So this basically, we are hoping will provide you with those adjustment opportunities to kind of, decrease kind of legal spend as well. So those are kind of the two goals we had. And quickly go into some of the dashboards I'd spoken about that are automatically available as part of IAQ as well. We have 12 different dashboards. One of them I showed you a screenshot of was the compliance dashboard. This I think will be pretty useful. You can basically see all the different activities all your firms are really billing you for, what's the highest number of activities you really pay for. Then eventually you'll be able to drill down and see all that information as well. And then we have some of the invoice review, kind of like how your reviewers are kind of performance, how your firms are performing. What are my top 5 law firms with the most number of violations, both from the IAQ and also from the CSM aspect. You can basically, if you want to have another conversation with them, you can do that as well. So a lot of like performance-driven dashboards, monitoring performance both of your firms and also for your invoice reviewers, all part of the invoice review, InvoiceIQ module that we've released.
So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about some enhancements that have been made both in the invoice review process and in the approval workflows. So the interactive grids and invoice approval changes projects has been going on for a couple of years, and bits and pieces of this have been added to several of the prior versions of Team Connect, and now we're completing that project by first wanting to improve our invoice review process by making custom fields available in the interactive grids. Part of this came out in the previous version, and part of it came out in this version. And I'll be walking us through some slides here showing that. And then we've also made some usability enhancements with the way that the scrolling works within the invoice between line items and the invoice overall. We had multiple scroll bars in there, and we have made that a lot more user-friendly. So the first thing that I want to show here is with the interactive grid scrolling, we have the height automatically adjusting, and then all of the invoice lines are available in a page, so that we just have page scrolling and we're not trying to do scrolling within the line item grid where you could hit two scroll bars right next to each other. One of the things that we've done in the interactive grids is, rather than showing all of the adjustment history within that grid, what we found in talking with our end users is they want to see the adjustments when they want to see it, but not have it there all of the time. So with the Has Adjustments field, you have the ability to hover over that, and it's going to show you the most recent adjustment, and then you can click on that, and if there are multiple adjustments, those will all be shown. And then another thing that we have is the ability to add support for custom fields within the interactive search view. And this is particularly on the My Approvals page. So as part of this project, we've added a lot of enhancements to what displays in the My Approvals grid with the interactive grids. What we've added is the ability to leverage support for custom fields. So here we see the matter number and matter category in the My Approvals grid, coupling that with the functionality that was already there to see those top line items. That's going to allow the reviewer to have a lot more information in this screen and approve invoices a lot faster that don't need to have any adjustments made. Again, trying to improve that usability. The other thing that we did as part of version 7 is some improvements to the invoice workflow process. So the market need here is really around clients having some mixed requirements on whether in the invoice review process an approval stop has to have a valid approver, or whether it should just automatically flow on to the next level. So what we did here was we wanted to provide a choice to our clients in making the decision about whether a stop has to have a valid approver or just fall through. What had happened in a prior version is that there was it would show an error, and part of the problem with it was that the error message that was showing within the workflow pane was not very user friendly. So that was those were the things that we were trying to clean up here. So in workflow setup, you will notice that there is a new field that is to check that a valid approver is required at this stop. And that's going to be optional on each of the stops of the workflow route. if a valid approver is required, it's going to prevent that workflow from going on. If there's not a valid approver required, then it will just fall through to the next stop. So what's going to happen is when the invoice comes in, goes into workflow, if there is a stop that requires a valid approver, but there's not one there, it's going to pause that invoice and it's going to go to the workflow process manager. A situation where this can occur is you have an invoice where the first step is to go to the main assignee, and that the main assignee on the matter is no longer an active user. So this is going to catch that type of situation where you have things that have changed with your users and invoices that need to go to those people. There's nobody there, so it's going to stop that. The second line here is going to show that you have the stop doesn't have a valid approver, so that stop is going to be skipped. And this is going to give us clear indication in our workflow history what's happened with this invoice.
So the first thing that we wanted to address is a cumbersome process around the timekeepers and rate approval process. And if you attended our 635 webinar back in April or May, you would have seen that we addressed part of this process on the Collaborati side, whereby firms were submitting timekeepers and then rates in two separate steps. And we addressed that in the 635. And so this work that we're doing in version 7 is a continuation and a completion of that process. So on the Team Connect side, for those of you who are responsible for approving those timekeepers and rates, there were 2 steps, and it is a little bit tedious and took a lot of time to go back and forth between you and the firms to get that approval step done. So the process required admins validating those things with multiple systems and so forth. So the goal here was just to reduce delays caused by rejections. So hopefully 20% of the time that's spent on some of that round and round is going to be eliminated, and then decrease the time to get invoices. So in other words, if you can onboard your timekeepers faster, that means you can start getting your invoices submitted more quickly. Okay, so this is a quick list of the features and functionality that we'll see on the next screen. There is some CSM settings that control this rate submission being one step, then showing the single step process to approve the timekeepers along with the rates and the ability to adjust, approve, or reject. Also, the timekeeper authorization part of the process, the ability to resubmit rate requests that have been rejected. And then a little bit of a separate topic, we'll also take a look at some improvements and enhancements to the recent addition of DEI tracking between Collaborati and CSM.
So I'm going to go into a demo for the most part here. I have a lot of slides that I've included because there are a lot of, informational pieces to this. What I'm pointing at here is that CSM settings drives a lot of this functionality. You need to have CSM settings set up in certain ways to get some of this functionality. There's new timekeeper settings specifically because we have more timekeeper settings, and there's going to be new rate settings I'll talk about as well. One of the new settings is whether or not we're going to authorize the timekeeper with or without a rate approved. So a lot of our clients actually have processes where the timekeeper should not ever be authorized until they have an approved rate. So we're able to now hold the timekeeper, no matter what settings you have on, even if it's automatically authorized timekeepers, we're going to be able to hold the timekeeper in this pending rate approval status if that setting is enabled. And then they also can start requiring some of these additional fields for new timekeeper submission, and I'll show that in just a second in the demo. These settings can be set globally for every single firm in office, or they can be set at the firm level, or they could be set at individual office levels, because things like data privacy laws are different in the different areas of the world. So you might have a global firm and the data, you want to require gender, but you really can only do that for the New York office. You cannot require gender, or you might not require gender for like the London office or the Paris office because of data privacy and things like that. In addition to the timekeeper settings that you see new in CSM settings, is going to be additional rates. So the idea that we can also require certain fields before a rate is submitted to the rate request. Again, today they would just have to reject these when they go to manually see, oh, the vendor forgot the start date again, I got to reject it back. By pushing these settings over and making it required, you always have to have a start date. We're going to save time for those downstream impacts where, you know, they've already sent it and all of a sudden it gets rejected back a day later because they sent it in a day of their time and we didn't get time to review it until the next day. And like I said, there's quite a few slides, but most of the stuff I wanted to show in the actual system itself. Cool. So I'm going over to our UT instance here, CSM. And I'll just call out that, again, in CSM settings, what a lot of things were captured under general for the timekeeper, we've kind of separated that out. So you have the new area of timekeeper settings, which should look familiar, maintaining contact records for certain options here. Again, automatically authorized timekeepers. If that's yes, we know that it's going to create the timekeeper automatically in the background, but we have a new setting that can supersede that. So if we require a timekeeper rate approval for the timekeeper to be authorized, then they won't be automatically authorized. They still have to have a rate to be approved. They'll automatically go into a pending state. We create the contact for them. We map everything, but they're not going to be ready to authorize on invoice charges and bill us until they have approved rates. And this allows us to have a single step process. We also could just require submission from Collaborati. You can't even send over a timekeeper without a rate. And again, I don't have any global settings here because I might have to do them individually in the office, but like I said, with any other option, I'll have to stop the timekeeper synchronization here, the CSM sync. We could say certain things like you have to have a home office or you have to have a practice area, even JD bar. Now, we do have the ability to require some of these things. On the Collaborati side, you can see that if it's still against the data privacy law, they are able to answer those with prefer not to answer and still adhere to these requirements. And as I mentioned, the rates also have the ability to say these are now required for rates to be submitted, end date, rate or comments, assigning matter details, which is a new field. And then internally, we can say this like we have for invoices, make sure that we don't reject any rates without putting internal comments, because then, of course, our firms don't know why we rejected it if we forget to add those comments. So I have require rejection reason for rejecting Collaborati rate requests turned on. And as I mentioned, we can go down into individual firms. There's J&J LLP, and they have the timekeeper settings as well. And if you notice, this one has gender required for this particular firm. So again, we can have these. If you want to apply this to all the offices of the firm, you can. If you want to apply the default settings that we saw globally from CSM settings, you can. And as you know, with multi-office firms, I could have different requirements for the New York office than I could have for the Toronto or the Paris office and things like that. So again, these are documented in the slides, but from a high level, they're available to set up CSM settings first before, like I said, most of the demo and things that I'm going to show will happen in those circumstances. So I'll see requirements on the Team Connect side or on the Collaborati side based upon the settings this client sets up in the CSM settings. So for the Collaborati side, the firms are going to be able to log in just like they do today, see most of this information that we've improved here. They have the ability to go to the clients and actually see the client settings that might be set up so that they can see a single shot of just everything this client has. So this is my client profile. And it'll give them a synopsis of all the requirements they might have for different offices or globally what's required across all fields. So one of the biggest feedback we've gotten is like the lack of visibility. All the different e-billing clients that a firm has, they can't memorize every single billing guideline. And then also it's very difficult for them to go jump back and forth between the upload process or the manual entry process and the billing guidelines at the same time. So I can show you here, I might be, authorized for all these offices, or depending on which offices I am actually authorized for, my requirements could change because, again, some of these could have different ones. When I click on next, what you'll see differently is that all of a sudden, I look at a client here, things that weren't required before, gender, veteran status, practice area, JD bar, those are now going to be required fields when I go in here as a firm. It's visibly here. I won't have to worry about like, okay, which ones are required for this office or not. It's going to show me the required fields just like it does today for every single normal required field. And it also will tell you selected clients require rates for the timekeeper authorization. So we added the ability for them to add rates, but it's also going to tell me the settings. I'm not going to get this timekeeper authorized if I don't add rates with them. And if I click another client, they might have, different settings. So depending on who I select, UAT, that client does not have any settings put on because, of course, they're in CSM 624. So that's in the manual process. The same thing will happen if you look at like our upload process here. So if I'm uploading timekeepers, or if I go to timekeepers rates, which is actually a little more authentic here, and I upload timekeepers with rates, I select my client here. If you notice, based upon all these selected, all this is required. If I take this off, nothing's required. So visibility is one thing that we've really worked on in this release, which is kind of cool for the first time. They're seeing dynamically what might be required. So if they forget and they're about to get a bunch of errors because the timekeepers they're uploading don't have a practice area, they know why. So they're seeing this here. They then choose the file they want to upload, and of course, it'll give them an error report. We do have Collaborati training that we've done already for the Collaborati support team. Most of our other groups here don't necessarily work on a lot of the details of the Collaborati side of stuff, so I won't go too far detailed into this, but just calling out that we have put this in just about every area where they will, firm will encounter timekeeper or rate submissions. They're going to see these new features being pushed through these new settings. So even during the official setup process for a new office or new firm, we've given them not only the ability to, of course, see this information, but in this case, if I have existing timekeepers that are missing information that's required, I can't assign them. So I might have to, like for this example, I can't assign this person because they're missing a JD bar or veteran fields. I can click edit, it populates it up here, and I can make the fixes as needed. And we also have this new option if the JD bar here is not applicable. Again, you can select, not applicable, so that they, again, if they require these fields, you still can populate them. If I'm a firm that does not give out our DEI information or won't give out like veteran status, we still have the option to say prefer not to disclose. So this will allow me to still complete my requirements and be able to send the timekeeper information to the client, even though they require the field. I still, as a firm, can prefer not to disclose if that's against our data privacy or we don't have a contract and anything like that in place with them. One other thing I'll mention too is very much an anticipated question we can get from clients. When you roll out a new diversity program or DEI initiatives, they want to know, like, well, is it going to be easy for our firms to make these updates? If they're not the first one on the bleeding edge, we've got a couple of clients already rolling out some of these things. The answer is, well, hopefully some of the firms that they share already have that information in the system, and it's easier for the firm. They just have to enter it in once. But we also did earlier in this year release the ability to sort of mass edit timekeepers. So if they click on export all timekeeper details, it exports it into an Excel file with the exact same format that they need to upload that same file into Collaborati, so they can just export this out in a CSV, go in and make the edits they need to in the actual document, and then upload it back into the system for mass editing purposes. And we have, again, the ability to do an upload where we actually say timekeeper data update only. So it's just a mass data change, not new timekeeper submissions. We're not going to, want to see a bunch of timekeepers that get submitted to clients all of a sudden because they weren't previously, just a data override. On the CSM side of things, when they send in all this new information, I've got the setting on where I require a rate for approval. So I'm not going to approve these timekeepers. They're going to be in this pending state called timekeeper authorization pending rate approval until they get a rate approved. And if you notice, there's ones with rates here. This is a way that the billing admins can actually monitor, see visibly, well, who are we waiting on? How long have they been pending? So I can see older ones as well. This rate got rejected, so now I'm waiting on Ross and Rogers Mumbai to resubmit it. So if it's taking a while, I can go in and contact that firm because they haven't, submitted it. If they did not submit over a rate with their timekeeper does not slip through, we still put the timekeeper in a pending status, but they won't have a rate assigned. So I can, again, contact Roger and Rogers Chennai and say, we got to submit the rates. We're not going to authorize that timekeeper until an approved rate is in our system. If they don't choose to automatically authorize and connect to the contact, so if they're mapping contacts, for example, they still go through the manual authorization process. So I'm going to click on this example here. When I don't have the automatically authorized contacts checkbox checked, then we still can look at them here. And if they have a rate attached, we'll see the details here. If they don't, it'll say no. But most of the times, the use cases, the clients want to simplify this step. And so they want to see, again, I want to review the timekeeper and the rate in a single step. So by clicking automatically authorized, but requiring a rate for authorization, they can do that. By clicking on the rate request, we've added all of the timekeeper information on these rates. So no matter how they enter it in Cloudvarati, we'll have a dedicated rate request for that timekeeper when it's a new timekeeper authorization request. And that rate comes over with just rate items for this timekeeper. So I see, okay, Millie Monty, legal assistant, timekeeper ID, the firm they come from. Do they have all this information, filled out that we ask them to, like gender and things like that, LGBTQ, whatever it might be. And then, well, is this rate correct? And yes or no. And so I have the ability now to say, okay, is this, yes, this is good. I can approve it. I can make an adjustment and approve it, which is common as well. So like in this case, pros 160,000 or 1,600 was probably supposed to be 160 in this case. I could do that and approve it with an adjustment. If I'm not allowed to adjust, then again, I can just reject it. When they get approved, if you notice, they'll fall off this pending approval status because once they have an approved upon rate, they are authorized. So they're no longer waiting for a rate to be approved. So I'm going to go check on Pink Diamond here. Oh, actually, I'm not because I know what that use case is. So this is one I rejected. I'm going to go ahead and reject another one. We have two options here. So for William Tavares, I have to add the comments. So I can look at this one and say, okay, that's right, 150. Advertising and marketing, and no, incorrect practice area. We don't charge the 150, we do 130. So what I'll do here is save, and then I'll reject just the rate back. So the timekeeper information, well, that's correct. This is the correct person. We're supposed to have William filling us. He's working with so-and-so on this, matter, but the rate's wrong. So I can just reject the rate back. The other option we've added to, so this is again rejected pending the next sync. We actually can say if it's the incorrect person. So let's say Liam Baker here. I look at them and I notice antitrust. We're not doing any work on antitrust matters. Who is this Liam Baker? It's not on my list. This is the wrong person. So what I can do here is not only reject, the timekeeper rate, I can actually reject the timekeeper as well. And there's a new checkbox here that says reject timekeeper record on rejection of rate. So it allows you to do both in a single step. So note, it gives you a warning because you're about to unmap this timekeeper and reject them back to the vendor, to the firm. But this is that single step process where if the rate's wrong, you can fix it, adjust it, approve everything, everything's correct, reject just the rate, or if it's the wrong timekeeper and the wrong rate, you can reject all at once. And it'll remove the timekeeper. It'll delete the contacts so you don't have extra contacts in your system and unmaps it. But it does also, because you notice that after they get deleted, I'll no longer have that information. It'll capture a history record, an audit trail of the action. So if you went back and looked at this rate request that you got, the last couple of weeks, it'll show you the associated timekeeper was rejected and removed, and I have one rate item for 150 start date, end date, blah, 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 blah. So it captures that as like an audit history tracking record. And one of the cooler features that we've added to the system as well is we have the ability to copy over timekeepers, invoices in Collaborati, but we don't have the ability to like resubmit a rejected rate request. So we've added this cool option. So if you get a rate request that's rejected, I can resubmit this rate request. So if I had something wrong, let's say it's the wrong associate rate, maybe it's last year's rate, I can actually resubmit it. And what it does is it copies over. You can't change the office of the client. That's vital information. If that was wrong, you need to resubmit a completely new rate request. You do have to explain like why you're resubmitting. I accidentally got the wrong rate from 2021. And then here you can add the rates or correct the rates if it's, in this case, it was the wrong rate for 2021. So maybe it was 19 Indian rupees. I click OK, and I can resubmit this much quicker, much faster. If it's these one-off options, we can resubmit a rate request that we had previously gotten rejected. And what it does here is it appends that with a resub 1 or resub 2, depending on how many times they've done it. And it's really cool because on the Team Connect side, when I get resubmitted rate requests, again, in here, I'll see it by like the exact same name, but at the very end it says resub 1. So I know this is a resubmitted rate request. And this also helps you kind of track like, okay, resub 1, what did they submit last time? So it links you to the previous rate request that got rejected. So I can check the old rate request and see that 150 rejection comp. Oh, they had the wrong start date. That was the issue. Okay, so let me see if the start date is correct now. Start date 9/20/21. Okay, yes, that's correct. And then I can go ahead and prove it. So that's kind of the main functionality in the CSM 7 release is its ability to, of course, have additional requirements when submitting timekeepers and rates, additional requirements to hold a timekeeper authorization to make sure they have a rate approved, to be able to resubmit the rate, a new portal pane here. And again, if there's a lot of rate requests, like there might be here, this timekeeper portal pane, there's also a search. So I can go ahead and jump into my search if I'm onboarding a lot of firms and timekeepers at the same time. And I can use a search to like search through and say, I want to see J&J, not Ross and Rogers. So I can get these done quickly if that's my particular firm I'm working with. Last but not least, we have one new feature that's related to the timekeeper diversity reporting. So one of the things that we did previously, if you remember, in our last release, CSM 635, we had the timekeeper DEI reports. The new fields were available for the first time. They weren't able, you can't require them yet. But we have the ability to report like down to, the detailed level. So we could see things like, what is this, quarterly spend by classification and gender, so timekeeper classification and gender. We can also look at things like race as well down here. So like it's breaking it down to Native American, Black African, Hispanic, White Caucasian. But we didn't have the ability to just mark timekeepers as diverse or not. So some of the feedback we've gotten with diversity programs for our clients say that they also look at like a summary level of diversity. So what we consider diverse, we want to see at a high level, they're able to do that. And so, oops, wrong one. I know I'm over time. So I just want to show this one last piece, which is a new rule that is completely definable by the client, where they can go to timekeeper validation and flag timekeepers as diverse based upon their own definition. So a lot of times it's going to be US-centric diversity programs initially. So that might be diverse based upon gender. They could say if they are basically, female, other non-binary, or any race besides white Caucasian, we want to identify them as diverse. And so it's a simple checkbox, yes, no type flag that is applied to all timekeepers. It's a rule that will run in the background if you're saving it for the first time like I just did. And it's also going to apply to any timekeeper that comes in the system. And we then have a new dashboard, DCBI dashboard, that gives us diversity metrics at the summary level for diverse timekeepers, yes or no. So quarterly spend from my diverse timekeepers. They might not all be, again, male or female breakdown, but it's just at a high level. I can see this. So in Q1, 43% of our spend, 49%, and 52%. So we're getting better in our diversity spend quarter over quarter, is showing in here. Difference between spend and utilization, and sometimes spend might be fewer people but higher dollars. So it can appear to be more diverse. Utilization sometimes can show us, well, it's not as diverse. The majority of the hours are still being billed, just at a lower rate.
So version 7 includes some architectural updates. Part of any software application is going to be just general care and feeding of the system. So from time to time, we have to make some technical updates to the architecture that runs the system, and that's what's included in version 7. Because of that, when you go through the upgrade from any previous version to version 7 or higher, it's going to include a one-time step that we want to check for to make sure that we don't cause a disruption in your, specifically your custom integrations. So Manu, if you could please click on the link to the article, I'd like to take you to an article that's published on our customer support, our customer success center. And this talks about what's included in version 7. You can see our key enhancements and features there. And as we scroll down, this talks about exactly what is the architectural update we made. In this case, we did do some changes to the underlying framework called Spring that Team Connect is built on. And because we did that, there is one specific area that we want to be extra careful that we don't introduce any disruptions for you. So the very specific potential risk there is around custom integrations. And if you have built, or if Mitratech has built for you, or a partner, or some other third party has built for you custom integrations into Team Connect, we would like to do an extra step during that upgrade process to find out if it's possible, if any of these updates would have replaced files, which would then need to be updated in your custom integration. So we've got some detailed steps on here about how to approach this. Our upgrades included team has this now as part of our checklist. But for those of you who might be doing upgrades through other channels, like through a partner, we have communicated this to them as well. But we just want to make sure that everybody has this on your radar. It is unlikely that anything is going to break during this upgrade. But if it does, we would like to catch it during that upgrade process so that we can do whatever remediation needs to happen, rather than going through the upgrade and then sort of finding it out in your test plan. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. That link is going to be included in the PowerPoint. We've made it available in the release notes. So that information should be easily accessible to you. Again, if you have any questions, though, you can reach out to the upgrades included team as you're starting to plan for when you'd like to go to version 7 or potentially okay. And next, we wanted to announce some kind of exciting things that we're doing with our patch process. So patches are, again, just sort of one of those necessary things when, for any software application, there's always going to be issues found. There's always going to be new and new and interesting ways that hackers find to, break into systems, and there's security concerns, just various things like that. So part of the care and feeding of the system is going to be doing patches. And previously, we had been doing just patches as individual fixes. And so it's incumbent upon whomever is overseeing the system to make sure that all those patches get applied, and keep a handle on what those are and what version you're on, and so forth. What we're doing is switching that process to a cumulative process. So we're calling these things patch bundles, whereby as we discover issues and we patch them, we will be rolling them into these patch bundles, and we will be releasing those monthly. So each month there will be a new patch bundle available that rolls up all of the issues found within that month, as well as issues from the previous patch bundles. So at any given point in time, when you upgrade to a new version and then you need to make sure that you've got all the patches installed. There's only one process you have to go through, and that is to install whatever is the most recent patch bundle that will incorporate all previous patches to that version. If you're on an existing version and you're just keeping an eye out for patch bundles and you want to potentially do those things monthly, you can monitor the page on our Client Success Center, and as those patch bundles are being released, you can choose to adopt those as well. Again, if you skip a couple of months and then you want to catch back up, you only have to apply whatever is the most recent patch bundle for your version. We're also expanding some of the information that's available on our Client Success Center. We are expanding our known issues. We're trying to be a lot more meticulous about what are those things that we are finding and making those proactively available in the list of known issues for each version, and then when those will be fixed in patches. So there will be visibility into what patches are coming up and when those are going to be released, rather than waiting until the patch is actually released. And then finally, we're doing some improvements to our documentation. So in addition to the lists that are available on the Client Success Center, within the release notes, we are improving the information that's included there to talk about what's needed to install patch bundles and patches, what are the upgrade considerations if there's certain dependencies on a specific feature or line item or configuration or anything like that, and a relative risk to updating with that patch. So hopefully that will really improve your experience in keeping your systems healthy and up to date.